Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you to this second edition of Labels. Labels was actually conceived about 1.5 years back as an initiative from License India, along with Economic Times, wherein we thought probably the awareness of licensing in this country is very, very limited. And the opportunity it holds is across 5 major sectors. So the name label actually came from licensing in animation, corporate brands, entertainment, lifestyle brands, and sports. And around these 5 major growth-oriented sectors or growth-oriented brand community, pretty much you would cover all the labels that you come across. So that's the whole idea how we started. And this being the first virtual label conference that we are planning, along with some awards that we are organizing, is an initiative to bring about a certain amount of community connect among these 5 sectors. What we're also trying to achieve out of this initiative of License India, which actually started about 15 years back with an objective of popularizing licensing in this country, is to bring about a positive change in terms of the new labels and the new commerce which is coming about. So today labels are not just created the way it was created about a decade back. There is an absolute new opportunities. There are a lot of D2C brands which are being created. So all that really needs a great amount of push. So recent unicorn, which is a D2C unicorn board, all of us are aware of, has done some very interesting work in terms of brand partnerships. So new age thinking is going when it comes to brand building, growth opportunities within the CPG space. And that's where we feel that licensing will span out in this particular decade in a very, very interesting manner. So without taking much time from all the distinguished guests, I thank each one of you for taking time out, especially our panelists. We've got a great panel coming in next couple of hours. And wherever you're joining from, I see Robert is joining. So wherever you're joining from across the globe, I wish you a very warm welcome. And over to back to Muskan. I would like Muskan to take it forward further. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sachin, for setting the stage so wonderfully for all of us. Without any further delay, I would now like to introduce our inaugural panel discussion, Licensing from the Lenses of Indian Market, and would like to invite Mr. Rajat Wahi, partner, Deloitte Consulting India, to kindly introduce the panel and take it ahead from here.
So as we start, I think it would be just good if my fellow panelists can just take maybe 30 seconds or a minute to just introduce themselves. I'm sure you guys will do a better job of introducing yourselves than I will. So starting with Kiran and then Tarun and Ameya, if you guys can just do a bit of introduction about yourself and what your company does, that'll be great.
Sure. Thank you, Rajat. So I'm Kiran Dcruz. I work with Sony Music India. I look after the brand partnerships and the music licensing division. Basically, we connect brands, music, and artists through various through content, through access and through experiences. That's one part of the division that I look after. The other part is the licensing bit, which basically covers content licensing to platforms, to various other DSPs, and also licensing to creative agencies, production houses, and agencies. So that's basically what I do at Sony Music.
Thank you. Ameya, you want to go next, or?
Yeah, sure, I can go. Hi, I'm Ameya Thakur. I'm one of the partners of Redwolf. We're a direct-to-consumer brand and mainly works in the e-commerce space. We license a bunch of brands and characters, and also do merchandise for creators and influencers that are around in the Indian space right now.
Thank you. Tarun? Can't hear you here.
My bad, sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, so my name is Tarun Saxena. I head the digital partnership and licensing piece for VOOT, which is the digital arm for Viacom 18. I also work on the strategy and the overall P&L for the kids franchise, which is Nickelodeon. That's short and sweet introduction for me.
Perfect, thanks. So thanks guys for making this work, and I'm glad everybody's systems are working and that I could basically join back. Starting with Kiran, and maybe we'll just go in not in any specific order. Let's talk about licensing, in India as a business, versus global markets, and what are some of the key challenges that you face in driving licensing? And everybody talk from your perspective. I know yours is music, Tarun's is. So we'll just talk about Ameya's looking at characters, etc., from various movies. So I think it'll be just good to get a perspective. So Kiran, let's start with you.
So I mean, I'll speak specifically from a music perspective. So licensing from a music perspective is basically put into two buckets. You've got content, which is there, and you've got content and artists. That's predominantly the two buckets in which we categorize this. And then under artists, we have multiple other buckets, which can be imagery, album art, and experiences, and so on and so forth. But I mean, content is pretty much. I mean, let's just to break that down further. So content is pretty much. We license content to multiple platforms, multiple DSPs, and so on and so forth. And we, as Sony Music, we have global licenses with a lot of partners. As well as we also do a lot of regional licenses with the regional players in India. So that's pretty much standard. When it comes to the artist ecosystem, it's from just a landscape perspective. In India, the music, the pop culture, the pop phenomenon is something which started only about 5 to 7 years back. So if you look at most countries, the music ecosystem has always been very artist driven. So and this ecosystem has kind of thrived for years. So hence every artist, they always have legions of fans who are enthusiasts, who are fanatic fans, who are enthusiast fans, and who always will support and pay for what an artist does in everything which they do in a non-music segment. So while that's not the case in India, because like I said, our phenomenon, our music, our pop business or the artist ecosystem kind of thrived only in the last 5 to 6 years, when 5 to 7 years with the digital explosion coming in. So from an artist perspective, while they might want to do a lot of things, in India, we're still pretty nascent. We've just about started doing small things, but we have a long way to catch up, with what the rest of the world is doing with artists. So the question is,
one or two challenges, just licensing agreements, challenges around that. Is it transparent, easy to get some of these licenses in place on the music side and content side?
Yeah, like I said, so for us, we don't specifically have any issues in terms of licensing of our content. The issue lies in terms of when we want to look at from an artist bucket. When we want to look at that, what happens is, the question is, are fans willing to pay for artists? So today, if you look at what global artists do, whether they are in various categories like apparel, fashion, real estate, hotels. Everyone's branched out into non. So while music is core, they've branched out into non-core businesses which are supported by fans and which are paid for by fans. So that is, whether is a fan willing to go the extent of paying for that is always a question mark. That's always been a constant challenge. And
so when you define non-core a bit. Like, what would that look like? What are some of those areas?
Non-core is basically, we get artists to get into, to get into deals where, you know, they have likeness or imagery, where they lend imagery to particular categories, like fashion, apparel, FMCG. So in the way, all across the world, you have a Jay-Z having, he's got a sneaker brand. You've got, you've got various artists having multiple facets of, you know, ancillary businesses, which takes care of alternate sources of revenue. That's that's something that we're still exploring, and there's something that, you know, that's a constant, constantly evolving. And I think over the couple of years, the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot more transitions happening in that space.
Okay, thanks a lot. Ameya, over to you. Just how are you you wanted to say something else?
No, so from our perspective, so because we've mainly been an e-commerce based brand, it's something, the company got registered in 2011 and we went live with the website in 2012. So from 2012 till now, like I've seen like a paradigm shift in, like, you know, the bunch of brands that are there in our space, where everyone started off doing sort of like fan merchandise, you know, printing quotes from some of like their favorite characters. Like it was very rare to find someone who was actually doing, like, you know, licensed merchandise. And I've seen that space evolve over the last couple of years, where, like, you know, a bunch of brands in our space have been taking those licenses, be it the Disney portfolio, the Warner Brothers portfolio. So I have seen that shift happening over like the last couple of years. It has been getting more and more organized every passing year. And I'm seeing a lot more niche brands coming down to India, because e-commerce as a whole has generally been exploding over like the last, like, you know, 6 to 7 years, like you've been mentioning. So it is, it's definitely encouraging to see things getting a little more organized. From a customer's point of view, that mindset of discounting is still pretty potent. So from a customer's point of view, they wouldn't really care whether they're buying a licensed t-shirt at a 500 rupees or they're buying like a cheaper knockoff at a 300 rupees on an Amazon or somewhere else. For them, at the end of the day, it's more or less the same product, because they get to express what they like. So getting that education to the customers, where it's important to, like, you know, it's important to find the value in a licensed product. And that certainly holds a little more weightage with like younger brands, or especially with artists, because merchandise might be like a small drop in the ocean for like a large global franchise, but something like a musician, that could be like a huge, like, you know, stream of revenue that will actually keep them supported for like the next project and so on. So it's definitely nice to see the space getting a little more organized. We like to say that we've played like a small part in it, being around for all these years. We do work with like a lot of independent creators, and we also work with like a lot of the larger like Western franchises. So that is like where we're at right now.
Thanks, Ameya. Tarun, how are you seeing it from a content point of view? And maybe, I don't know, did all of you do your intros, or do you want to just spend maybe 30 seconds just talking about your company and business as well?
So I'll take both actually, and I'll try and link this up in a more generic fashion, so that it basically appeals to the other audiences. I'm a broadcaster. In that sense, I'm a middle between what Ameya does and what Kiran does. So for me, content obviously is the focal point. Character licensing in that sense is the biggest one from the revenue point of view. And that's not just true for me, it's true for the industry per se. So from my perspective, content licensing, we do content licensing across platforms. So we have content, VOOT actually has content partnership from Jio, Airtel, to the other brands, which is MX Player, you have Facebook, and you have YouTube. So we've pretty much done partnership across the ecosystem. The partnership ways and means differs. From our perspective, what are the key challenges? I would say piracy, for one, is a challenge. Also, the awareness. In that sense, for us, the focal point is content. So whether someone wants to look it from a Jio or from VOOT, to us, it may not make a sense. But all said and done, we're still trying to create our own platform, which is VOOT. So in that sense, it's a bit of a catch-22 for us. But overall, if the content works, it gets popular. For us, that I think is a major focal point for us. From the other point of view, which is really the character licensing. So we actually extend our characters from the content perspective, which are more popular across FMCG brands. So we've done partnership for some of our characters with three brands. So Motivational, for example, has Pratap Snack endorsing it, and some of the other ones. Again, I think largely it is investment, awareness, piracy. All those are the common issues that we face from a licensing perspective.
Okay, thanks. So similar issues across the board, looks like, but at least good to see that at least the industry is getting organized. There's a lot more growth, and obviously, given the size of the Indian market and the number of age profiles you can get, especially targeting products at different age groups, and obviously, like what Kiran was mentioning, the size of of getting like in the West today, all the artists have so many different products, from cosmetics to personal care to sneakers to apparel. They've all invested heavily in these businesses, right? And those have become bigger than their music businesses or their current business. So I think those are the real opportunities, right? So just going on to the next question, and maybe I'll come back to you, Tarun, on this. What sectors do you think is the real opportunity being done in licensing? Obviously, just looking at things like IPL, Bollywood, cafes. I know all of you guys are using various means to sort of extend licensing. So what are the various sectors that are interesting that people should think about when they are looking at licensing and broadening their sort of their business base? So did you?
So I'll mean.
Okay, so you guys can hear. Oh, sorry. Tarun may be having it. So Kiran, you want to go first on this?
I'm not very clear.
My voice breaking?
Yeah,
you guys can't hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up, Rajat.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Signal is strong. So Kiran, do you want to go on this first?
Sure. Okay. We've been, from a music perspective, I think we've been kind of experiencing a lot of success in the gaming field, for example. Gaming has given us a new opportunity, new revenue stream where, we are able while typically you look at it from a content perspective, I think we've also, the fact is that we've gone beyond just licensing music or content to a game, to a platform, to gaming platforms, than to even put, characters like, artists in the game. So, for example, we did something with in the region in China. What we did was we did a Alan Walker PUBG integration where we had Alan Walker's music in the song in the game, and we are also looking at ways and means on how you can use Alan Walker's fan base to actually reach out to a much more larger audience. PUBG already being the number one is the number one game. They've now taken that to a different level, saying that how do we also engage with the artists. So there are a lot of creative ways which are right now currently being developed, and that's happening. Similarly, what we've done here in India is also we've been able to take an artist like Raftar. We've taken his track and we put it into the Epic Games, which is by far the first for any Indian artist to do so, and that's been hugely successful. And
who's that for? Who's that for?
For
which
Epic,
artist is that?
This is Raftar, the rapper Raftar.
Okay.
Okay. So we've been able to take his track and we've been able to put it there. The associations has been pretty fruitful. So now we're working on. So there's we're working on ways on how we can actually take this to the next level. So gaming is definitely one aspect for us. It's something massive. The other aspect which we are now looking at, where we are opening it up with a lot more artists, because like I said, the artist ecosystem is slowly but steadily understanding the licensing business, saying that, how do we go beyond just regular revenue buckets and look at licensing as a regular form of revenue, or royalties coming as regular form of revenue. So today we've got artists who are lending their names to discotheques. Like we've got Badsha, who has a stake in Dragonfly, which is which is a resto bar. So we're getting into it. So there is multiple things which are happening from an artist perspective also, where artists now, where the artists have reached a certain stature, they've created a certain community, a community or a legion of fans, where brands want to capitalize on. They want to sit on it and say that how do we convert these music fans into brand fans? I think that's a very, very pertinent question which people keep regularly asking, saying that and which is why I think, I'm sure Ameya and Tarun also have these influencer campaigns saying that how do we capture their fan base, and how do we get that part? So yeah, I mean, these I think are two growth areas which from a music perspective, I see is massive.
Sure. Ameya, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we basically we license like a lot of we license the brands where we see like a lot of content especially coming in, because whenever like a new piece of content comes out, there's hype around it, and because there's hype around it, people tend to buy merchandise around it. So for just a single example, something like the Marvel movies for like the last decade or so has been the franchise of this generation. You've had like a good 20+ movies that have come out year on year, introducing one new character after the other, and you have like the aggregation of those in the Avengers movies. So we see like a direct correlation that whenever there is one fantastic like movie or TV show that drops, there's always interest around the merchandise of it. So yeah, like Kiran was mentioning, we do piggyback off of that fan reaction. So if a show doesn't do well, we don't see the merchandise doing well. So that is something that definitely is like core to like the sort of like work that we do right now, just because we're so involved in like how the content performs. And I see like great potential in one. I do not know why Bollywood does not pay more attention to merchandise. Every time someone has gotten in touch, it has always been the marketing agency, maybe like a couple of weeks before like a movie is about to drop, saying that, hey, we might need like a couple thousand pieces to be printed. So it's such wasted potential.
Quite strange why they don't pick up on this, given the popularity of Bollywood movies, and they stay on for a long time. Why the artists don't see that as a revenue model is quite bizarre, right?
Yeah, and I guess it would be the responsibility of the production house to do this, where you would license evergreen movies, things like Andaz Apna Apna or something like that, where you still have like this cult fan base that has been with you over the decades, and always like your newer franchises. Like I think Krish did a fairly decent job when like they had the third odd movie coming out. So yeah, building these franchises, having some content coming out around them at all times, being able to perpetuate that through social media, having like the talent also perpetuate those is like an ecosystem that needs to be organized in India. I don't see that happening. I think this is something a lot of like younger independent artists can do much better, just because there's less red tape around. This one's given me like rights to my likeness and so on. So I think Indian musicians especially should capitalize on this. I see great potential in Instagram influencers, on YouTubers, all of these new media personalities that are coming up, to be able to get into the merchandise space. I think that's like a great space for growth for like people like us, and like, a great chance for revenue for people like that. So.
Phenomenal. I think that's great ideas, and clearly lots of opportunity there, right? Because it's completely an untapped market, from cosmetics to personal care to fragrances to, so many lifestyle products, right? So much can be done. And in the West, it's like been milked for years. I worked for Redwolf years ago, and how much with our models, we had like a whole line of products that we launched. But it's interesting, it just doesn't seem to gel with the India mindset. Tarun, your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that is largely from India perspective. If you look at it, it's a large part of retail is still unorganized. I think that really impacts the whole ecosystem. If you had a more organized retail, you had a more streamlined laws in those sense, and a less of a piracy, it would be a much easier journey for a licensor to actually carry those monetization. Once you have monetization coming, everyone from the Bollywood artist to an independent musician will jump on that bandwagon. I think that journey
that's a good point. I think
so that journey is a difficult
Yeah,
one.
you're right. I think that whole piece around the retail being fragmented is a huge challenge, right? How do you get the product to end consumer, right? What are the retailers you work with? Yeah, that's a big challenge.
And even if you want to, let's say, kill some of the piracy bit, that's next to impossible. You may do the raids, you may try doing things, but ultimately, if a licensor doesn't get his share of things, he will not make efforts to invest in that brand. Because if that investment doesn't make sense for him, that's where the whole problem is. I think once you have a more organized retail, once you have a more organized piracy curbing measures, I think it's just a matter of time that people are willing to invest in it because they will see returns around it. The problem right now is people are not seeing the returns around it simply because even after investment, you have someone else who will just pirate it and make money on it.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. So piracy, and so I think that brings me to the next question. How do you, and maybe Tarun, you can only continue. What are some of the asks from global licensing firms, licensors? What is the big fear about India, and why is it this not working? Piracy is obviously critical. Enforcing rules, enforcing IP. Just talk a bit about that, as you guys do it, because you were talking a bit about these how social media is also becoming a big disruptor in terms of license fees, etc. So just talk a bit about that.
Sure. So from a social media perspective, I think we've got two giants, Google and Facebook. They take the lion's share of the social media. YouTube, in that sense, is a big gorilla from a VOOT perspective. It's the biggest VOOT platform in the world, and it does phenomenally well. The piracy on YouTube is rampant. While they have their own measures in terms of a piracy check, you have content ID matches and all those stuff, but it's still very rampant. So you search for a movie, you'll still get it, even though it may have released like a day back or even before a theatrical release. So I think that's a big nuisance which needs to be curbed. There have been measures proactively taken across the board. I think it's YouTube on their own, licenses or the brand owners on their own have done their bit on it. But given the way the things have really not panned out for us. So I think that's a menace which is here, I guess, for some time to stay. Even from a Facebook perspective, you'll find a lot of content. It's a phenomenal marketing platform in that sense. So in that sense, it also takes a land share from both a revenue perspective as well as from a audience time perspective. So the two itself in that sense are a breeding grounds for piracy, even though they are phenomenal in terms of connecting with your audience. But I think they act like a double-edged sword. We've done our bit, but again, there's a lot to be done from those aspects.
Which is the second one you mentioned? One was YouTube. The other one was which one?
Facebook. So Facebook, in that sense, is a phenomenally market. If you want to connect with your audience, I think Facebook Watch is still in a nascent state. It still hasn't reached a YouTube level. But as an engagement matrix, I think Facebook or Insta in that sense are phenomenal. So Facebook from a engagement perspective does really well. And I think that's a thought that will be echoed by Kiran also and Ameya also.
Thanks. So Ameya, over to you. What do you think are some of the asks from licensors? And we'll get to the licensees ask as well as the next one because you're a licensee. So, but as a licensor, what was their expectation about the India market from a license, from awarding licenses to you for various brands and their characters, etc.
So right now, what's been great is you have like a lot of like your big franchise movies, especially that have been doing a lot of dubs in regional languages. So we do see like a lot of interest coming from tier 2 or tier 3 cities. So getting access to that content to the widest audience possible has been fantastic. Social media helps as well because it helps people find brands like myself whom they normally otherwise would not have heard of as well. What I would as like a small like licensee, like a licensor would expect is more in terms of marketing, where you have like a brand like, say, a Marvel or a Game of Thrones. If they are dropping like that new season, you will not see like the road shows and the promotional hype that happens in the Western market happening in like a country like India. I will not see like the Iron Throne going around different cities in India. I will like, Marvel did try to do like the Avengers related exhibition in Bombay, but I do think that, there's more that can be done. And also it would help if you can get like a lot of like the brands like us who do like, make products around those IPs involved in that process. I just think it would be a win-win for both parties, because you get that exposure, fans get to hold on to something tangible that expresses like their fandom for that IP. And the IP also gets that exposure amongst people who otherwise, would not have cared about, like, say, like an Ant-Man movie coming out versus like a big tentpole movie like Avengers coming out. So I do think that there's a lot of scope for marketing.
So what stops brands, what stops licensors from doing that in India? Is it just that they don't see the size of the market? What is the reason? Because if they can do roadshows in other countries, surely India with, even if you take 300, 400 million people as the target base for various movies, etc., going out, what stops them from doing that?
You will have to ask the licensors. But I do think it's the size
of the
market.
You guys are licensees. What's the discussion? What's the discussion you guys have with them that says, okay, we don't want to do this, and let's just launch it and then see what happens? What's the rationale for that?
I do think that that is a decision that is above the pay grade of the people who we normally deal with, because I would imagine that it's, I'm sure there's a lot of customs issues, and it's a huge expense in getting like these very fragile, like, be it like, the cars from like the DC, like the Batmobile or something like that, or getting like these, like, the costumes. I'm sure there's like a huge deal of expense and a lot of like bureaucratic issues of getting these things into India. It would be great if like the government could support like, fun moves like this. But we like usually like the sort of promotional activities that we see here are much smaller. You might have like, some gift hampers going to influencers or celebrities that, that might like that particular brand. So I remember there was a big girl power push around the Powerpuff Girls, where like, there was a whole campaign around girl power and like, women's equality and issues like that. So those events do happen on a smaller scale. I just wish they would happen to a much like larger scale, just because the potential audience in India is huge. And I think it would help like a lot of like licensees as well. So I do wish a lot more of that.
Sure.
So Rajat,
I think Kiran has clear.
Sorry, I'll just come in here. So I heard Ameya talk about that. I think brand guys are not averse to investing, be it in terms of costumes or anything else. I think it also boils down to what sort of events and what scale is it happening. We can talk about, I can't remember any big event in terms of let's say something like a Comic-Con. Now, Comic-Con happens in India. So that's again an event driven by someone else. Where is the Indian event? So I think that event culture itself doesn't really work in India. You have sports matches and you have live music concerts, but that's about it, period. Where exactly is your, events where you actually have characters which are popular? So a TV character which is popular, he can float around. The problem is, I don't know, events there. You have kids characters which are phenomenally popular. You have Modu Patlu, you have Rudra Shiva, all those guys are very, very popular. The event has to be there, or there has to be a playground or some sort of a stage where those can actually come in. And I think that's the journey we still need to make in India. In West, going out for a live event is pretty much like a routine in a month or fortnight, something like that. But that culture has still not prevailed in India. We still go out as an entertainment to a movie. Even drama in that sense is not there. So for a live event, or what Ameya was talking about, for that to happen, that culture has to be built in, and that is a journey that needs to be done.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, that's like a massive opportunity, right? Has Kiran dropped off? I can't see him on the screen. I don't know whether he's had a problem with connectivity. So just coming back to you guys, we'll continue the conversation, and Kiran eventually, I'm sure, will join in. So I mean, from your perspective, I mean, just taking a just taking it to the next step, what are some of the things that, I mean, do you see any Indian characters being globally licensed? I mean, would you take a play on that and take some of the Indian characters? You talk about Motu Patlu and you have all these mythological characters. Is there an opportunity to take Indian brands into a licensing play globally as well? I mean, have you tried that? Have you looked at it? The reverse sort of play?
So as a business, we have not done that because we've been more focused about licensing licensing international characters and having that merchandise available in India. So that's not something I can speak to in terms of actually executing such a play. But I do think there's like a huge opportunity, especially character-wise, yes. But it would depend on if those particular characters have an audience in countries abroad, because a lot of this would be content-driven. So if there is, I don't know, this might be the NRI audience, so I'm not sure who it would cater to. If there is an audience for it, there's always an opportunity to license these. But normally how it would work is you would have that licensor who would either go out and license it themselves to like a brand in those countries, or they would deal with like a third-party agency who would like represent them in those countries. So unless like there is a brand who is like present in these multiple countries, it's quite it wouldn't be like a global deal as such. You would have multiple players like, doing this in those each individual countries. Where I do see like some opportunity again is with the creators, where you might have like an Indian YouTuber or like an Indian news outlet, which might have like, be getting those views in those countries abroad. And that is also IP that I see as being like very licensable, like, in those individual countries.
Yeah, because a lot of the Indian actors are very popular in Southeast Asia. When I lived in Russia, a lot of Indian actors are still very popular in these countries. And I wonder why that part has not evolved. Kiran, welcome back. I think you may have just dropped out, but just coming to this whole play, you do licensing for Sony. Is there an opportunity to do the reverse licensing as well and take Indian music, international Indian brands and Indian artists to do the reverse licensing play? Is there an opportunity there, do you think?
No, absolutely. I think there have been multiple instances. For young Shah Rukh, I don't know. I mean, there was a track which is pretty popular and it was burning the. It was actually all across on all social media platforms, and it had a massive stream count. Now, Young Shah Rukh as a track, basically, it's a celebration of Shah Rukh Khan as as the actor. And it's been done internationally, and it's actually traveled the distance. If you look at the track per se, it's just been phenomenal. So it's not that we've not had these instances which are now coming up with Bollywood as a genre also around. It's not just Bollywood has now become a genre, it's become a mainstay. Everybody in the world knows about Bollywood. So people are actually celebrating artists. And so that moved from Bollywood, it's now moving into artists as well. Today you have collaborations with, you've got, international artists collaborating with Indian composers, Indian singers. So, almost, I can say, there's almost a dozen people who are right now collaborating with international artists. So that is definitely already happening. We've seen that. I think we've also seen that with what Mr. Rahman's been able to take into music also, on a global pedestal. And so there's a lot of collaboration, and with our Indian market, music out of our country, which is so diverse. Collaborations, are now flying all over.
Okay, phenomenal. So Tarun, over to you. Your thoughts.
I'm sorry. You have someone like a Hrithik Roshan that has like an HRX. You might have like a Virat who has like a ROM. These are again IPs that can easily be licensed abroad. So that is a very organized
way. Absolutely. Yeah, because these guys are now pretty popular as global icons, right? They're no longer just Indian icons.
Yeah, for that matter, even
sorry, go ahead, Kiran.
No, I was saying that, for that matter, even like just to add to what Ameya was saying, even, even a brand like Being Human today is so hugely popular and has massive amounts of sales coming from all across the world, even, from their online stores and so on and so forth. So it is. I mean, we've also had Indian artists creating lines. I mean, clothing lines and fashion lines for themselves, which have an online domain, which kind of brings in people from all across the world. So it's not just Indian fans that today Indian artists are catering to; they're also catering to a global audience.
Okay, Tarun, from your perspective, anything on how do you see the content-wise, like Indian plays and serials and other stuff? Is there a huge market there as well from a content perspective?
Absolutely. I think there is a huge market outside India, not just in India. We used to, for example, lock our content in India. We are basically most of the content was put outside India on YouTube, and it did phenomenally well. It's only recently that we've started airing content on YouTube in bits and pieces in India. But from the opportunity outside India, I think the opportunity is phenomenal. Nagin, for example, is very popular in China. Balika Vadhu is like a cult show in a lot of Middle Eastern countries. So Turkey or some of the other ones. The character, the show, Indian culture, all those caters really well from a Western audience. You also have phenomenal Desi crowd in US and UK. Which actually adds to that whole aura of Indian content doing well. So I think the opportunity is there. What we need to do is customize it, localize it, look at those sort of things, which does really well. So give them shows in the language that they prefer, maybe customize it, remake it with the artists that they are more familiar with. I think all that will do really well. But I definitely see a lot of opportunity from that perspective.
And is that something you guys do actively, market Indian shows to global audiences, especially where there's a large Indian diaspora or Middle East diaspora?
That's right. So we actually do that. VOOT in fact is available in UK and US. We'll also look at other markets as well. But at this juncture, we just have that. But our linear channels, for example, is across the world. So you have Colors feed, which goes to UK, US, and all of that does good in terms of both ratings as well as the revenue. So for us, I think international market in that sense is big. So we definitely see a lot of potential, not just in India, but across the globe.
Perfect. So just last 10 minutes, guys, may I have some 2-3 top thoughts in terms of how to make licensing, just an advice to people who may have logged on today, just in terms of 2 or 3 key factors of getting success in licensing and 2 major challenges that people will face in this business.
I'll go first. I think from a licensing perspective, I think whatever your product is, concentrate on making it popular. I think that's a requisite. You make it popular, people are willing to take this across. A Game of Thrones merchandise, from a keychain to a T-shirt to even some of the dialogues, all those are phenomenally well, simply because that show is so popular. So I think it all boils down to whether you can make that product popular or not. I think as long as you can do that, rest of the things do work well for you. Obviously, there is investment required. There's a journey to be done, both from a marketing perspective, from a growth and nurturing perspective, and also omni-channel distribution and other stuff. But having said all that, I think the key focus should be to make that thing popular. I think that's the focal point from a licensing perspective that one should look at.
And 1 or 2 key sort of difficulties, challenges people will face in this?
I think
from just starting a licensing.
I think people are not willing to invest. So even from broadcaster level, if you want to take that out to some of the licensors, be it some of the retail giants, people are hesitant because India doesn't really have a precedent. So unless we need to actually make a success story out of it and actually cite those to make it popular. I think that's something which is lacking. So there's only a handful examples that I can think of in terms of a success story. So I think that's a scope of improvement on needs to do. Also, the other bit is the awareness. So a lot of people talk about licensing, but licensing can actually go through n number of sectors. One should not just restrict themselves to an FMCG or, for that matter, a retail. There are other sectors that one needs to look at. Some of the, you need to think out of box on what will work for you as a brand and as a product, whether that will appeal to an audience. I think that's something that needs to be also built in.
Perfect. I mean, your thoughts on that? Two sort of areas where people can really help. Two ideas on scaling up the whole licensing business and some of the challenges people may face in that.
In terms of us, a lot of apart from like the more mainstream properties, there are a lot more niche properties, things like anime, things like characters that are not as well known, where they do have like the little niche audiences because people have like discovered them somehow on the internet in India. But to be able to license those in India, to be licensed for the Indian market, though things like royalties and MGs do come into play. Right now, we are trying to license one property, but like the guarantee that they are asking for is really high, and that particular property does not have the audience in India that it would have globally. And so, from licensors do need to like start catering like those amounts, keeping like the Indian market in mind. It would be great if we could do like a trial period for like a year or something like that. And if it works well, happy to pay the royalty, for year 2, year 3, and so on. So that little sense of being experimental to see if something can work in an Indian market or not is something that I feel should be experimented with. In terms of scaling up, again, copyright infringement is definitely like an issue. Like Tarun had mentioned earlier, I think things are a lot more organized in the e-commerce space than they are in offline retail. So I think there's a good opportunity to be able to stop infringers or just generally promote the people doing it legitimately. Like it hurts to be, to pay that 10%, 15% in royalty when I'm seeing like a knockoff being sold for $300. Like it actually makes it's disheartening from like a brand's point of view. So that is something definitely that I don't know if like going down the legal system is like the most apt way of doing it. But if there's somewhat of like a cease and desist route where these brands can work with someone like an Amazon, someone like a Google, someone like a Facebook to discourage the advertising / retail of those counterfeit products, that is something that I think will help immensely. Yeah, I think those are like two things that can be quite easily achieved to just help like the overall licensing space grow.
Perfect. I think those are very valid points here, because that obviously is the biggest fear, right? You pay all this royalty and then you see knockoffs being sold at every street corner for half the price the moment the thing becomes popular. And if it's not popular, then you are anyway not getting the scale to pay the royalty. So it's a chicken and egg, right? Yeah. Knockoffs will only get done when something is very popular, but then you lose the royalty on that. So yeah, you're right. I think maybe a lot of participation from inside on it, because it's loss of revenue as well to the government, right? Because you would genuinely pay the royalty, pay taxes on the business, and then all this gets infringed. Same in FMCG, in every category. The level of counterfeit product being sold in India through these small factories that spring up, make the product, dump it out into the market, and then move on. Kiran, your thoughts on that? How do you just two or three examples of scaling up licensing? If you want to take on, if somebody has to take on a new licensing, business, how do you do that? And what are some of the challenges that are faced, especially in the music side?
So I think we are all aware of it, but I think people, with a lot more platforms, I think today content needs to be. You can't just create generic content. You need to create content specific. You need to create content which is specific to a particular platform. It can't be generic content. I think from a content perspective, the amount of hygiene that needs to come in, the amount of, the thought process that goes into creating pieces of content for specific platforms is of amount importance. It cannot be, it can't be that, I'm just going to create. It's just like I have a creative thought and it's a creative process and I'm going to just create something. What you believe is going to fly is definitely not what the audience is going to like. So I think it needs to be a thought through process where, artists, creators, and people should basically, also have put on a business cap and just not a creative thought process there. I think that's very important from a content perspective. The other thing which I think also people should be aware is about being creative. It's not like, with what both Tarun and Ameya said, I think it's also about not just going out and saying, I'm going to put this piece of content, and this is how I'm going to be monetizing it. Because somebody else has done this way. I think they also need to come up in ways in which they can possibly think on, unconventional ways which are unconventional, which are breaking clutter, and put things out like this. What we did with this young Shahrukh was as an experiment, turned out to be extremely good. So there are multiple examples in the music industry where we say that, how there's been a piece of content, or even if you look at today of all these social media platforms, there's one 10 seconds, 15 seconds, which just goes out and becomes viral. That's how content is, and content is spontaneous. So that's something that, people need to be creative in how they want to go about putting these pieces of content. I think the third thing which I think I would also like to stress upon is, that there are other pieces, and this I could direct it to Ameya as well, is you could actually even look at, in the West, there's a lot of places where, album artwork is massive, is huge, is a massive category. It's pretty untapped in India. Nobody does that because, I've had lots of licensees who come to us and said that we want international catalog. Now, yes, international catalog is there, but why not the Indian catalog? When you're looking at the Indian diaspora, why are you not looking at the Indian catalog? Why are you not looking at catalogs where, Indian artists are putting out content themselves? They are huge in their own right. So, you could look at album artwork or even lyrics, for example. Case of point being, when we had an artist called Divine, Divine has he has his own collection called Gully Gang. So there are so many, there's definitely so many places where we can fill that need gap and cater to just the Indian diaspora. That's not happening. So I think we should just look at, not just look at international, look at also Indian collabs. There's loads and loads of things which you can do even with independent artists as well. So there are opportunities. I think it's just about, we're at the cusp of trying to move into the next level of licensing, saying that while like what you said, Rajat, you can look at, there are the traditional categories, and then there are the ones where we need to think out of the box. So I think that's pretty much that. And in terms of challenges, issues, I think it's the same across all industries. Nothing changes there.
Okay. I think we are literally on the top of the hour. Great discussion, guys. Any last thoughts, Tarun? Just some rapid fire. One last thought for the licensing business. Where do you see this? And if you're having this conversation 5 years from now, where do you see this business, and how big do you think this business could be in India?
I think I'm very upbeat about this business. So it's just taking off for me. So really right now in nascent state, very upbeat about it. 5 years down the line, probably we'll be talking about success stories and the huge turnover that we can make in those 5 years. So fingers crossed.
Perfect. Ameya, your thoughts?
Yeah, extremely optimistic about where things are going. I generally see e-commerce as a whole just exploding in India, especially in a post-COVID world, where we are seeing a lot of users who would otherwise be uncomfortable with buying something online from a brand that they've never heard of, giving it that first shot, liking the process, and then coming back for the second or third purchase. So e-commerce as a whole, very optimistic about more Indians having more and more access to more content, which means a lot more interest in licensed merchandise. So I see things like growing quite well in an Indian market right now. So yeah.
Perfect. And last word from you, Kiran. Where do you see this market from overall? If you are having this conversation 5 years from now, how big? What's the size of opportunity? Any numbers?
I think, I won't go at 5 years. I think I might come a little more earlier. At the rate at which, we're exploding, artists are, emerging. I think we're all, from a music perspective, I think we're almost there. I would say maybe another 2 or 3 year trajectory. You will see a lot more, you'll see a lot more unconventional categories which have been unlocked in both in terms of licensing as well as from a content perspective. I think the time is now. There's a lot of things happening. And I'm very, very optimistic about the future.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Great session here. I think we are on the top of the hour, but a lot of learning, especially for myself. I haven't done too much, looked at this space too closely, but clearly lots of opportunity, and hopefully people who logged on were listening in, lots of interesting thoughts. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it, and good to connect with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all, gentlemen. I think this was the best panel discussion to have started with. And thank you, Mr. Wahi. I think you paced it extremely well. Thank you once again. Thank you, everybody.